Now I'll go into the code behind page of the ASPX for phase 2. And what I'm going to want to do is add access to the TDCI by design configuration user interface provider namespace. That is going to give me access to a class called AppLink Provider. And what we're going to want to do is change us from inheriting from System Web UI Page to instead inherit from AppLink Provider. Now the AppLink Provider itself inherits from System Web UI Page, so everything you're already used to as far as page events and similar are made available to you. We're just adding additional functionality on top of that. To give you an example, some of that additional functionality is getting the current screen that's running in the configurator. We can also get a screen option. We can update a screen options value. And we can tell the configurator that we finished making updates by calling update. We'll get into all of those in more detail later. The first thing I need to do is go into our ASPX page, and we probably want to change the title of it. Now what we're going to want is we're going to need a text box so the user can enter a value to update our screen option with, and we're also going to need a button so the user can click the button to tell us to update that screen option. So let's go ahead and add those items. I'll go into our toolbox, and I'll select a text box, and I'll drag it onto the ASPX page. We'll change the ID of that text box to be value. And you notice that this text box has run at server on it. That allows us to access this text box from the code behind page. I'll go ahead and put a break so we have a new line. And now we're going to need to add that button onto the ASPX page. I could go into our toolbox and grab a button and add it onto the page, but the AppLink Provider provides us with a button that does most of the functionality of updating for us. So what I can do is come into the page load event and get access to a BTN update button. That's fantastic, but I don't need it in the code behind page. I need it on the ASPX page. So how am I going to get it from the code behind onto the ASPX page? Well, in this case, whoops, the easiest way to do that is to grab a placeholder element and drag that onto the page. All I'm going to do is change its ID to be update area. It also has run at server on it, so we can access it from the code behind page. And then in our app link, what I can do is access that update area placeholder, go into its controls, and add our update button. What that's going to do is when we run this page, it's going to put the button right here underneath the text box when we render the page. Now the next thing we need to do is the AppLink Provider is handling all the communication and post-back information for us, but it needs to call into us to tell us to update that screen option. So in order to do that, all we need to do is override the update response values function. And the first thing that we want to do inside of this is to get the screen option that we want to update. So let's assume that we're going to have a screen option named Phase 2. So let's go ahead and try and retrieve that. I'll create an AppLink screen option. I'll assign that that screen option to our current screen, and then I'll call get screen option on that current screen. And it's looking for either an index or a name of a screen option. We could use the index, but anytime we rearrange those screen options, that would break this code. So instead of doing that, we're going to go ahead and stick with the name, which will be Phase 2. And now what I need to do is call update response and tell it to update this option by its option ID and the value that we want, which in our case I can access the text box that we created called value and get its text parameter. And then after I'm done updating all these screen options that I want to, in our case just one, I want to tell the configurator that we're finished updating and to submit the values. just like that by calling update. So that's it. We can go ahead and build the project. I would go ahead and move those assemblies over into the web project again, but we're not going to go through that again. And we'll go into the rules, and we'll just need to create some more rules to call into our phase 2 applet. So I'll create a condition, I'll create a screen, we'll create some configuration variables, so just phase 2. Change our screen title. We'll add a screen option, and we'll set its application link of the screen option to be phase2.aspx. I'll go ahead and save that. And we're ready to run channel sales. So let me go ahead and go into configuration for our demo part. And you see we have our second screen and screen option. I can click on the app link, and I have my text box with our update button. And go ahead and enter the value test and click update. And I see that the value is successfully sent to the configurator and displays here on the left hand side. Now one thing that's a little surprising is that that value isn't also in this text box. In fact, when I continue configuration and then finish it, and then we go to reconfigure that line item, and I go into that second screen option, I still don't have that configuration value in our applet. And so that would be a little strange for a user not to see the value that they selected here. So let's go ahead and try and fix that. We'll go into our solution. I'll copy the phase 2 ASPX page, and we'll use that in creating our third applet, which I'm sure you can guess we're going to call phase 3. Now there's a few things you have to do when you're renaming an ASPX page. The first is we need to go into markup of that phase 3 ASPX. And you see this inherits line. It's currently set to phase 2. We just need to change that to phase 3 and save it. We should probably also change the title. And we'll go into the code behind and change the name of the class to instead be phase 3. Also, if you look at how we're getting this screen option, we're using phase 2 in strings. We'll need to change that to phase 3. So I could just change the value, but because we've changed it now for the first time, what I'll do is move it up into a constant string value. And then I'm going to change this code to use our constant string value. And that just gives us one easy spot to change the screen option ID across our class, so that we're not hunting through code or doing a find and replace or anything like that. So I go ahead and save it. Okay, sorry about that. So the first thing we're going to need to do in order to get the value from our screen option and put it back into our text box after we finish updating is we're going to need to retrieve that screen option. So the first thing that comes to mind is I can take this code, copy and paste it, and we can put it wherever we need it. But that would give us 2 copies of code that we have to maintain, 2 spots where there could be issues. So instead of doing that, what we'll do is create a new function called getScreenOption. And all I'm going to do is come in here and copy this code and put it in that function, and then return the option that we just got.